The distant howl of a lone wolf echoed across the rugged landscape. As Zara Gallagher watched her last dollar disappear into the grimy hands of the stagecoach driver, knowing with painful certainty that her desperate journey west had just become even more perilous. The year was 1873, and the California gold rush had long since cooled, but the promise of a new beginning still drew desperate souls to the frontier. "San Andreas is still 10 miles north, madam," the driver said, pointing down a dusty road that disappeared into the golden horizon of the Sierra Nevada foothills. "Ain't no more stops until then." Zara adjusted the worn shawl around her shoulders and tightened her grip on the small cloth bundle that contained everything she owned in this world. The other passengers had disembarked at the previous stop, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the 5 small, tear-stained letters tucked into her bodice, one from each of her children. 5 years had passed since she'd last seen them. 5 years of working as a seamstress in Boston, sending every spare penny west to the orphanage in San Andreas, where they'd been placed after their father had abandoned them all. 5 years of promising in her letters that one day she would come for them. And now that day had arrived, though she had nothing but determination to offer them. As the stagecoach disappeared in a cloud of dust, Zara squared her shoulders and began walking. The October sun beat down on her neck, and the road stretched endlessly before her. But somewhere ahead lay her children Daniel, Sarah, Joseph, Mary, and little Thomas, and nothing would stop her from reaching them. By the time the sun had begun its descent toward the western mountains, Zara's feet were blistered and her throat parched. She'd drunk the last of her water hours earlier, and the rolling hills seemed to multiply with each weary step. When she spotted a small creek cutting across the landscape to her right, the temptation was too great to resist. She made her way down the gentle slope, kneeling beside the clear water to drink from cupped hands. The cool relief was immediate, and she closed her eyes in momentary gratitude. "Madam, you might want to be careful there. That water's running through cattle country." The deep voice startled her, and Zara turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. As he approached, his features became clear, broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest, a jawline shadowed with several days' growth of beard, and eyes the color of the sky just before dusk. A dusty Stetson was pulled low over his forehead, and a star-shaped badge glinted on his chest. "Sheriff Yates Prescott," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of courtesy. "Most folks call me Yates," he nodded toward the creek. "There's better water at my cabin just over that rise. I'd be happy to offer you some, along with a bit of food if you're hungry." Zara hesitated, years of hard-learned caution making her wary of any man's offer. Noticing her reluctance, he added, "Or I can escort you directly to San Andreas if that's where you're headed. It's not safe for a woman to be traveling these roads alone, especially with nightfall coming." "How did you know I'm going to San Andreas?" Zara asked, rising to her feet. A slight smile crossed his face. "Not many other places to be headed on this particular road, madam. Besides, you've got the look of someone with purpose." He glanced at her worn shoes and the small bundle she clutched, "and somewhere important to be." Something in his direct gaze made Zara feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. Still, trust didn't come easily. "I appreciate your concern, Sheriff, but I've managed on my own for quite some time now." "No doubt," he replied, replacing his hat. "But these hills have mountain lions that get mighty curious after dark, not to mention the occasional highwayman looking for easy targets." He gestured toward the setting sun. "You're still a good 2 hours' walk from town, and it'll be pitch black before you're halfway there." Zara weighed her options. The exhaustion of the long journey from Boston by train, riverboat, and finally Stagecoach had left her dangerously depleted. And the thought of delaying the reunion with her children by even one more night was unbearable. "I need to reach the Silvercrest orphanage before nightfall," she finally said. "My children are there." Something shifted in the sheriff's expression. "Silvercrest," he repeated, a curious note in his voice. "I know it well. Mrs. Abernathy runs a tight ship there." "You know Mrs. Abernathy?" Hope flickered in Zara's chest. The stern-sounding matron had been her only contact with her children for 5 long years. "Everyone in San Andreas knows Mrs. Abernathy," he replied with a nod. "I can take you there directly. My horse can carry us both, and we'll be there in less than an hour." The prospect of reaching her children so much sooner than expected was too tempting to refuse. "Thank you, Sheriff. I would be most grateful." He extended a hand to help her up the bank. "My horse is just over there. Name's Copper. He's gentle enough, though he has his opinions about carrying double." The magnificent chestnut stallion nickered softly as they approached. Sheriff Prescott secured her small bundle to the saddle before mounting in one fluid motion. He extended his hand down to her. "I'll need to sit behind you," he explained. "Better balance that way." Once they were settled, with Zara perched somewhat uncomfortably in front of him, the sheriff clicked his tongue, and Copper began a smooth trot along a trail that paralleled the main road. "What brings you to Silvercrest, if you don't mind my asking?" His voice was close to her ear, necessary to be heard over the rhythmic hoofbeats. "My children," she answered, her voice catching on the words. "I've come to bring them home." He was quiet for a moment. "Home to where?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "I had hoped to find work in San Andreas." "What kind of work do you do?" "I'm a seamstress. I worked for a dressmaker in Boston for the past 5 years. She felt him nod behind her. "San Andreas could use a good seamstress. The town's grown since the mining company established regular operations. There are families now, not just prospectors and drifters." As they crested a hill, Zara gasped. Below them, nestled in a valley cut by a winding river, lay San Andreas. Even from this distance, she could make out the church steeple, the main street lined with wooden buildings and scattered homesteads on the outskirts. In the fading light, windows glowed golden, and smoke curled from chimneys against the darkening sky. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It has its moments," the sheriff agreed, a note of pride in his voice. "Been home to me for 15 years now." They descended the hill, and as they drew closer to town, Zara's heart began to race. 5 years of separation, 5 years of heartache were about to end. Sheriff Prescott guided Copper through the main street, nodding at townsfolk who called out greetings. Zara noted the curious glances directed her way, wondering how long it would take for gossip to spread about the strange woman riding with the sheriff. They turned onto a side street and then up a gentle hill, where a large, somewhat austere 2-story building stood. A wrought iron sign above the gate read, "Silvercrest Home for Children." The windows were brightly lit, and the sound of children's voices drifted from somewhere inside. Zara's breath caught in her throat. They were here. Her children were inside those walls. The sheriff dismounted first, then helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her, partly from the long ride, but mostly from the overwhelming emotion of the moment. "Are you all right?" he asked, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. He led her to the front door, rapping on it with confident knuckles. A moment later, it swung open to reveal a stout woman in her 50s, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Sheriff Prescott," the woman said, her eyebrows rising slightly at the sight of Zara. "What brings you by this evening?" "Mrs. Abernathy," he greeted with a respectful nod. "I've brought a visitor who's traveled a very long way. "This is Miss," he paused, realizing he hadn't asked her name. "Mrs. Zara Gallagher," she supplied, extending her hand. "I've written to you many times over the years about my children." Recognition dawned in Mrs. Abernathy's face. "Mrs. Gallagher? Yes, of course." She opened the door wider. "Please come in. I wasn't expecting you until next week at the earliest." "I traveled as quickly as I could," Zara said, stepping into a neat entryway. The smell of bread and stew filled the air, and the sounds of children were louder here, laughing, arguing, living. Sheriff Prescott lingered at the doorway. "I'll leave you ladies to your reunion," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Mrs. Gallagher, welcome to San Andreas." "Thank you, Sheriff," Zara said, meaning it more deeply than she could express. "For everything." He nodded once, then turned and walked back to his horse. Zara watched him go, struck by a strange sense of loss at his departure. "Your children will be so happy to see you," Mrs. Abernathy said, drawing Zara's attention back. "They've kept every letter you've sent, you know, read them until the paper's nearly worn through." Tears threatened to spill from Zara's eyes. "Are they well? Have they grown very much?" "Children tend to do that," Mrs. Abernathy said with unexpected gentleness. "They're healthy and as happy as can be expected given the circumstances. They've never lost faith that you would come for them." A door banged open somewhere in the house and a girl's voice called out, "Mrs. Abernathy, Joseph and Thomas are fighting again." Zara's heart leapt at the names. "Sarah," she whispered. Mrs. Abernathy smiled. "Come, they're just finishing supper." She led Zara down a hallway to a large dining room where about 20 children of various ages sat at long tables. Zara's eyes frantically scanned their faces, looking for features she would recognize. And then, at a table near the back, she saw them. Daniel, now 15, tall and lanky with their father's strong jawline. Beside him, Sarah, 13, her dark hair braided the way Zara had taught her so long ago. Joseph, 10, with a mischievous glint in his eye that even the years couldn't dim. Mary, 8, delicate and serious as she'd always been. And Thomas, barely more than a baby when she'd last held him, now a sturdy 6-year-old. For a moment, Zara couldn't move, couldn't speak. They were so beautiful, so grown, so utterly changed, and yet exactly the same. Mrs. Abernathy cleared her throat. "Children," she announced, "we have a special visitor this evening." Heads turned toward the doorway, and then Sarah's fork clattered to her plate. "Mama," she whispered, rising slowly from the bench. "Mama," Mary echoed, louder, more certain. And then they were rushing toward her, all 5 of them, a tidal wave of emotion and movement. Zara sank to her knees, arms open wide to receive them. They crashed into her, a tangle of limbs and tears and questions all tumbling out at once. "You came. I knew you would. Did you bring presents? Are you staying forever?" Zara laughed and cried, trying to touch each of them, to memorize the new angles of their faces, to hold them all at once. "My darlings," she managed through her tears. "My beautiful children, I'm here now. I'm not leaving you ever again." Later, after the initial storm of emotion had settled into a gentler current, Mrs. Abernathy showed Zara to a small guest room where she could spend the night. "The children will need time to gather their things," she explained. "And I imagine you'll need to secure lodging in town." The practicalities of the situation came crashing back. Zara had spent her last dollar on the stagecoach fare. She had no job, no home, and now 5 children to provide for. "Yes," she said, trying to keep the worry from her voice. "I'll begin looking for work and a place to stay first thing tomorrow." Mrs. Abernathy studied her with shrewd eyes. "Sheriff Prescott might be able to help with that. He knows everyone in town." Zara nodded, remembering the kind sheriff who had rescued her on the road. "I'll speak with him then." That night, lying in the narrow bed with Sarah and Mary curled against her, They had refused to sleep in their own beds. Zara stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with worries and plans. The joy of reunion was tempered by the stark reality of their situation. She had skills, determination, and love to offer her children, but was that enough in this rough frontier town? Morning came too soon, bringing with it both sunshine and uncertainty. After breakfast, while the children were gathering their few possessions, Mrs. Abernathy pulled Zara aside. "Sheriff Prescott is here to see you," she said. "He's waiting in the front parlor." Surprised, Zara smoothed her travel-wrinkled dress and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Did he say what he wanted?" "Only that he might have a solution to your housing situation." When Zara entered the parlor, Sheriff Prescott stood by the window, hat in hand. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and she was struck again by the steady blue of his eyes. "Mrs. Gallagher," he said with a nod, "I trust you had a good reunion." "The very best," she replied, unable to keep the joy from her voice. "I can't thank you enough for helping me get here safely." He waved away her thanks. "I spoke with Mrs. Abernathy last night after I left. She mentioned you're in need of both work and lodging." "Yes," Zara admitted. "I had hoped to secure employment before bringing the children, but circumstances forced my hand. As it happens, I may have solutions for both problems." He gestured for her to sit, then took the chair opposite her. The seamstress, who's been serving San Andreas, retired last month to live with her daughter in Sacramento. Her shop on Main Street sits empty, with living quarters above it. The town council owns the building and is looking for someone to take over the business. Zara's heart skipped. "A dressmaking shop, with living space," he nodded. "It's modest 2 bedrooms and a small sitting area with a kitchen, but it's clean and well-maintained. The shop itself is fully equipped with everything a seamstress would need. Mrs. Fletcher left most of her supplies behind when she left." It sounded too perfect, too providential. "I couldn't possibly afford to buy a business," Zara said, hope fading as quickly as it had risen. "The council isn't looking to sell," Sheriff Prescott explained. "They're offering a rental arrangement. 3 months without charge to establish yourself, then a percentage of your earnings thereafter. The town needs a good seamstress, and from what Mrs. Abernathy tells me, you're highly skilled." Zara blinked, surprised that Mrs. Abernathy had spoken so favorably of her. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," the sheriff suggested with a small smile. "I can take you to see the place right now if you'd like." "I would need to bring the children," she said. "They've only just found me again. I can't bear to be separated from them, even for an hour." "Of course," he agreed readily. "I've got a wagon outside, plenty of room for all of you." An hour later, Zara stood in the middle of a well-lit shop, gazing around at the neatly organized shelves of fabric, the sturdy work table, and the gleaming sewing machine in the corner. Upstairs, her children were exploring the living quarters, their excited voices drifting down through the floorboards. "This is—" she began, but words failed her. "Will it do?" Sheriff Prescott asked, watching her closely. "It's perfect," she whispered. "But I still don't understand why the town council would offer such generous terms to a complete stranger." The sheriff leaned against the counter, arms folded across his chest. "San Andreas is growing. The mining company has brought in steady work, and families are putting down roots. There's a need for services like dressmaking, especially with the quality Mrs. Abernathy says you provide. The council sees it as an investment in the town's future." It still seemed too good to be true, but Zara couldn't afford to question this blessing. "When could we move in?" "Today, if you'd like. The place has been kept clean and there's basic furniture upstairs. You'd need supplies, of course, but I'd be happy to introduce you to Mr. Jenkins at the general store. He might extend credit until you're established." Zara nodded, trying to absorb the rapid changes in her fortune. Just yesterday, she'd spent her last dollar on the stagecoach. Today, she had the prospect of a home and business for herself and her children. "Sheriff Prescott," she said, meeting his gaze directly, "I don't know how to thank you for your kindness." "No thanks needed," he replied. "And please call me Yates, everyone does." "Yates," she repeated, testing the name. "Then you must call me Zara." A peculiar expression crossed his face, but before she could interpret it, the children came thundering down the stairs, all talking at once. "Mama, there's a real bathtub upstairs. Can I have the room with the window seat? Is this going to be our home forever?" Zara laughed, gathering them close. "Yes, darlings, this is going to be our home, and I'll be working right here in this shop making dresses and shirts and whatever else the good people of San Andreas might need." Daniel, always the most serious of her children, looked at Sheriff Prescott. "Are you going to help us, sir?" The sheriff looked startled by the direct question. "I'm just doing my job, son, helping newcomers settle in." "But you'll come visit us, won't you?" Sarah asked, with all the guileless charm of her 13 years. "I expect our paths will cross frequently," he said diplomatically. "San Andreas isn't such a big town." Zara caught a hint of discomfort in his stance and decided to rescue him. "Sheriff Prescott Yates has many responsibilities. We shouldn't presume on his time." He shot her a grateful look. "Speaking of which, I should continue my rounds. Mr. Jenkins at the general store is expecting you whenever you're ready. Just mention my name." After he left, the children peppered Zara with questions about the tall sheriff who had helped them. "Is he your friend, Mama?" Mary wanted to know. "He seems very nice," Sarah added with a sly glance that made Zara wonder if 13 was too young for matchmaking thoughts. "The sheriff is a kind man who has helped us tremendously," Zara said firmly. "Now, who wants to help me measure the windows for new curtains?" The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Zara opened the dress shop, naming it simply Gallagher Fine Sewing, and word quickly spread about the new seamstress in town. Orders began to trickle in alterations at first, then requests for new dresses, as the women of San Andreas discovered her skill with a needle. The children settled into their new life with the resilience of youth. Daniel found part-time work at the livery stable after school, proud to contribute to the family's income. Sarah helped in the shop, showing an aptitude for sewing that pleased Zara enormously. Joseph, Mary, and Thomas attended the town school, making friends and bringing home stories of their days that filled the small apartment with laughter. Sheriff Prescott Yates stopped by regularly, ostensibly to check on their welfare, though Zara noticed his visits often coincided with her fresh baked bread days. He was unfailingly kind to the children, answering Joseph's endless questions about being a lawman, admiring Mary's careful stitches, and listening with grave attention to Thomas's elaborate tales. With Zara, he maintained a polite, somewhat formal demeanor that puzzled her. There were moments when she caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster, but he always looked away quickly, as if caught doing something improper. One evening in late November, as Zara was closing the shop, the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see Yates standing there, hat in hand, a light dusting of snow on his shoulders. "Sheriff," she greeted him with a smile. "You're out late tonight." "Winter's coming early this year," he replied, brushing the snow from his coat. "Wanted to make sure everyone on the outskirts had enough firewood. How are you and the children settling in?" "Wonderfully," Zara said, gesturing to the stack of orders on her work table. "The business is growing faster than I expected. I may need to hire help soon if it continues." "That's good news," he said, genuine pleasure warming his voice. The town's lucky to have you." An awkward silence fell between them, filled only by the soft ticking of the clock on the wall and the muffled sounds of the children playing upstairs. "Was there something specific you needed, Sheriff?" Zara finally asked. He cleared his throat. "Actually, yes. The town's holding its annual harvest dance this Saturday. It's a tradition everyone brings food to share. There's music and dancing." He shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I thought perhaps you and the children might enjoy attending. As newcomers, it would be a good way to meet more of the townspeople." "That sounds lovely," Zara said, ignoring the slight flutter in her stomach at the thought of dancing. It had been so long since she'd done anything purely for enjoyment. "The children would love it." "Good," he said with a nod. "It starts at 6 at the town hall. We'll be there." He lingered a moment longer, seeming on the verge of saying something else, then simply nodded again and left, the bell jingling cheerfully in his wake. The children were ecstatic about the dance. Sarah immediately began planning what they would all wear, while Joseph and Thomas practiced clumsy dancing steps that involved more stomping than grace. Even Daniel, usually so serious, seemed excited about the social event. Saturday evening arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Zara had worked late into the night all week to ensure her family was properly dressed for the occasion. She'd remade one of her own dresses for Sarah, crafted new shirts for the boys from fabric remnants, and sewn a pretty blue dress for Mary. For herself, she had altered her best dress from Boston, adding fresh lace at the collar and cuffs. As they walked the short distance to the town hall, the children skipping ahead in excitement, Zara felt a surprising lightness in her heart. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving, she was living. The town hall was transformed for the occasion. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the room. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a small group of musicians played lively tunes in the corner. Nearly everyone in San Andreas seemed to be in attendance, from the oldest residents to the youngest babes in arms. As Zara and her children entered, several people called out greetings. In the short time they'd been in town, they'd already formed connections with Mr. Jenkins at the general store, with Mrs. Dawson the baker, with the families whose children attended school with Joseph, Mary, and Thomas. "You came." Yates's voice came from behind her, and Zara turned to find him standing there in his Sunday best, looking startlingly handsome without his usual sheriff's attire. "We wouldn't have missed it," she replied, suddenly aware of Sarah's knowing gaze darting between them. "May I get you some punch?" he offered. "That would be lovely, thank you." As he moved toward the refreshment table, Sarah leaned in close. "Sheriff Prescott looks very handsome tonight, don't you think, Mama?" Zara gave her daughter a warning look. "Zara Gallagher, whatever you're thinking, stop at this instant." Sarah just smiled innocently and drifted away to join a group of girls her own age. The evening progressed in a whirl of music, laughter, and conversation. Zara met more townspeople, accepting compliments on her sewing and fielding questions about her life before San Andreas with practiced vagueness. She watched her children integrate into this community that had so quickly embraced them, Daniel deep in conversation with the blacksmith's apprentice, Sarah giggling with new friends, Joseph and Thomas playing a noisy game of tag with other boys their age, and Mary solemnly teaching a younger child how to twirl in time with the music. "They're happy here," Yates said, appearing at her side again. He'd been circulating through the crowd, playing host as one of the town's leading citizens, but he'd returned to her several times throughout the evening. "Yes," she agreed, watching as Thomas shrieked with laughter at something Joseph had said. "Happier than I dared hope. And you," he turned those steady blue eyes on her, Are you happy in San Andreas, Zara? The directness of the question caught her off guard. Yes. More than I expected to be. The music shifted to a slower tune, and around them, couples moved to the dance floor. Would you care to dance? Yates asked, extending his hand. Zara hesitated. It's been a very long time since I danced. It's like riding a horse, he said with a small smile. You never really forget how. She placed her hand in his, trying to ignore the warmth that spread up her arm at the contact. He led her to the dance floor and placed his other hand at her waist with respectful propriety. As they began to move in time with the music, Zara became acutely aware of his nearness, of the subtle scent of soap and leather that clung to him, of the surprising grace with which he guided her through the steps. "Where did you learn to dance, Sheriff?" she asked, partly to distract herself from these unsettling observations. "My mother insisted on it," he replied. "Said no son of hers was going to stomp around a dance floor like a bear with a sore paw." Zara laughed. "She sounds like a formidable woman." "She was," he agreed, a shadow of old grief crossing his face. "She passed 10 years ago, influenza." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. "What about your parents?" he asked after a moment. "Both gone," she said. "My father when I was 16, my mother just before I married." They danced in silence for a few measures, the conversation having ventured into more personal territory than their previous interactions. "May I ask you something, Zara?" Yates said finally. "Of course. The children's father, is he?" "Gone," she said firmly. "He abandoned us 6 years ago, took what little money we had and disappeared. Last I heard, he'd gone to the Dakota Territory." Yates's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "I'm sorry, that must have been difficult." "It was," she acknowledged. "But we survived. And now we're here, starting fresh." The music drew to a close and they stopped dancing, though neither moved away immediately. "Thank you for the dance," Zara said, suddenly self-conscious under his intent gaze. "My pleasure," he replied. Then, with obvious reluctance, he released her. "I should check on the musicians. They're due for a break soon." As he walked away, Zara became aware of curious glances directed their way. She returned to the sidelines, where she was immediately approached by Mrs. Dawson, the baker. "The sheriff seems quite taken with you," the older woman said without preamble. "He's been very kind to my family," Zara replied neutrally. Mrs. Dawson raised an eyebrow. "Yates Prescott is kind to everyone, it's his nature, but he doesn't dance with everyone." Zara didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject, asking about Mrs. Dawson's famous apple tarts. But the baker's words lingered in her mind for the rest of the evening. Later, as they walked home under a canopy of stars, the children chattering excitedly about the dance, Zara found herself thinking about Yates, about the strength in his hands as they held hers, about the rare moments when his serious demeanor gave way to a genuine smile, about the respect he showed her and her children. She shook her head slightly, dismissing the direction of her thoughts. She had come to San Andreas for one purpose: to reunite with her children and build a stable life for them. Romance had no place in that plan, especially not with the town sheriff. Yet as the weeks passed, and winter settled over San Andreas in earnest, Yates continued to be a presence in their lives. He brought firewood when the snows came, checked on them during particularly cold nights, and always seemed to have time to listen to Thomas's stories or help Daniel with a difficult mathematics problem. Zara found herself looking forward to his visits, to the quiet conversations they had after the children were in bed, to the way he respected her independence while still offering support. December arrived with preparations for Christmas. The dress shop was busier than ever with orders for holiday finery, and Zara worked long hours to meet the demand. The children helped where they could, Sarah assisting with simple sewing tasks, Daniel delivering completed orders around town, and the younger ones keeping the shop tidy. One evening, a week before Christmas, Zara was working late on Mrs. Jenkins's new dress when a knock came at the shop door. Surprised it was well past business hours, she set aside her sewing and went to see who it could be. Yates stood there, snow dusting his shoulders, his breath visible in the cold air. "Sheriff," she said, opening the door wider to admit him. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he assured her, stomping snow from his boots before entering. "I was just passing by and saw your light still burning. It's late, Zara. You should be resting." "Christmas orders," she explained, gesturing to the half-finished dress. "Mrs. Jenkins wants this for the church social on Sunday," he frowned. "You're working too hard." "Says the man who patrols in blizzards," she countered with a small smile. "That's different." "Is it? We both have responsibilities." She moved back to her work table, picking up her needle again. "The children are asleep if you'd like to sit for a while. There's coffee still warm on the stove." He hesitated, then nodded, removing his coat and hat. "Just for a few minutes. I need to finish my rounds." Zara continued sewing as he poured himself coffee and settled into the chair beside her work table, a chair that had somehow become his over the past weeks. They sat in comfortable silence, broken only by the soft snipping of her scissors and the occasional crackle from the wood stove. It was a pattern they had fallen into, these quiet evening moments when the day's demands had eased and the night's stillness wrapped around them like a blanket. "Zara," Yates said suddenly, his voice low, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." She looked up from her stitching, finding his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Yes. I've been sheriff of San Andreas for 10 years now. I have a house about a mile outside of town, nothing fancy but sturdy and warm. 15 acres of good land, a few cattle, enough to support a family comfortably." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "What I'm trying to say is I care for you, Zara, and for your children. These past weeks, getting to know all of you, it's been the happiest time I can remember in a long while." Zara's heart began to race. "Yates, please let me finish before I lose my nerve," he said with a hint of a smile. "I know you came here to build a new life for yourself and your children. And you've done that admirably. You don't need anyone's help or protection. But I'm asking if there might be room in that life for me, not as a helper or protector, but as a partner, a husband, a father to your children." Zara set down her sewing, her hands suddenly unsteady. "You're proposing marriage?" "I am," he confirmed. "Not very elegantly, I'm afraid." "But we've only known each other a few months," she protested, though her heart was singing a different tune entirely. "Sometimes a few months is enough to know what you want," he said simply. "I understand if you need time to consider. There's no hurry." Zara looked into his earnest face, thinking of all the kindnesses he had shown her and her children, of the quiet strength he possessed, of the growing feelings she had tried to ignore, the children. She began. "I love them," he said firmly. "All of them. They're remarkable, Zara, a testament to your strength and love. I would be honored to help raise them, to be a father to them if they'll have me. And the dress shop, my work, is important to you and to the town. I would never ask you to give it up." Zara drew a deep breath. "I need to think about this, Yates, and I need to talk to the children. They've already had one father abandon them. I won't bring someone into their lives without being certain." "Of course," he agreed readily. "Take all the time you need. My feelings won't change." He rose to leave, setting his empty coffee cup on the sideboard. At the door he paused, looking back at her. "Merry Christmas, Zara." "Merry Christmas, Yates," she replied softly. After he left, Zara sat motionless at her work table, her mind whirling with thoughts and emotions. Marriage had not been part of her plans when she came to San Andreas. She had sworn never to depend on a man again after her husband's abandonment. And yet, Yates was nothing like her first husband. He was steady, reliable, kind. He respected her independence while still offering support. And he truly seemed to care for her children. The next day, after closing the shop early, Zara gathered her children in their small sitting room above the store. "There's something important I want to discuss with you," she began, looking at each of their faces in turn. "Sheriff Prescott Yates has asked me to marry him." Their reactions were immediate and varied. Sarah clasped her hands together in delight. Daniel's expression turned guarded. Joseph and Mary exchanged wide-eyed looks. Thomas simply asked, "Does that mean he'll live here with us?" "No, darling," Zara explained. "He has a house outside of town. We would live there with him." "But what about the dress shop?" Sarah asked, suddenly concerned. "I would still run the shop. We'd come into town each day." Daniel, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Do you love him, Mama?" The directness of the question momentarily took Zara aback. I care for him very deeply, Daniel. He's a good man." "That's not what I asked," her eldest son persisted. Zara looked at her hands, then back at her children's expectant faces. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I believe I do love him." "Then you should marry him," Daniel said with the certainty of youth. "You deserve to be happy, Mama." The simple statement brought tears to Zara's eyes. "It's not just about my happiness, Daniel. This affects all of you. Yates would be your stepfather." "He's nice," Mary offered. "He listens to my stories, even the long ones. And he taught me how to whittle," Joseph added. "He gives the best piggyback rides," Thomas declared with authority. Sarah, ever the romantic, sighed happily. "I think it's wonderful, Mama. You'll be like a princess in a fairy tale marrying the handsome sheriff." Zara couldn't help but laugh at that. "Life isn't a fairy tale, Sarah. Marriage is work and compromise and partnership. But it's also love," Sarah insisted. "And Sheriff Prescott loves you. Anyone can see that." "Is that what everyone thinks?" Zara asked, surprised. All 5 children nodded in unison. "Mrs. Dawson says he looks at you like you hung the moon and stars," Sarah reported. "Mr. Jenkins told me the sheriff hasn't smiled this much in all the years he's known him," Daniel added. Zara shook her head, wondering when her children had become such observant little gossips. "Well, what do you think? Should I accept his proposal?" They looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that siblings sometimes share. Then Daniel, speaking for all of them, said simply, "Yes." Christmas Eve arrived with swirling snow and festive cheer throughout San Andreas. Zara had completed the last of her orders the day before, and the shop was closed for the holiday. In their small apartment, a modest pine tree stood decorated with paper chains, dried berries, and small wooden ornaments that Yates had carved for each of the children. Zara had not yet given him her answer. After talking with the children, she had sent him a note asking for the holiday season to consider his proposal. He had respected her request, maintaining his regular visits but making no mention of marriage. Now, as she put the finishing touches on the children's Christmas gifts, new mittens for Thomas, a journal for Mary, a hunting knife for Joseph, a shawl for Sarah, and a fine leather-bound book for Daniel, Zara thought about the gift she had made for Yates. It was a new shirt, finer than any she had ever sewn, with careful stitching and perfect seams. And sewn into the collar, where only he would see it, was her answer to his proposal. A simple yes. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah, who had been helping wrap the children's gifts, went to answer it. "Sheriff Prescott," Zara heard her daughter exclaim. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas to you too, Sarah," Yates's deep voice replied. "Is your mother available?" "She's wrapping presents," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still perfectly audible. "But I'm sure she'd like to see you." Zara quickly hid the gifts under a blanket just as Sarah ushered Yates into the sitting room. He wore his heavy winter coat, dusted with snow, and carried several packages wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "Yates," Zara greeted him warmly. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," he replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," she assured him. "We're just preparing for tomorrow." "I brought some gifts for the children," he said, indicating the packages, "and something for you if you'll accept it." "That's very kind," Zara said. "Would you like some tea to warm up?" "Thank you, but I can't stay long. There's a situation at the Miller farm I need to attend to, nothing serious, just a dispute over some wandering cattle. I wanted to drop these off before I went." "Of course," Zara said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Perhaps you could join us tomorrow for Christmas dinner, around 2 o'clock. His face brightened. "I'd be honored." Sarah, who had been watching this exchange with undisguised interest, suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, I just remembered I promised to help Joseph with his thing in the kitchen, right now." And with that transparent excuse, she disappeared. Alone with Yates, Zara felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. "I have something for you as well," she said, "but it's not wrapped yet." "You didn't need to get me anything," he protested. "It's just a small token," she assured him, though in truth it was much more. "I'll give it to you tomorrow." He nodded, then reached into his coat pocket. "This is for you," he said, extending a small package wrapped in blue paper. Zara accepted it with a murmured thank you. "Open it now," he urged. "Please." She carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a small wooden box, beautifully carved with intricate patterns of leaves and flowers. When she opened it, a soft melody began to play, a gentle, lilting tune that reminded her of spring. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "I had it sent from San Francisco," Yates explained. "The music, it reminded me of you, gentle but strong." Zara looked up at him, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you, Yates, I'll treasure it." He smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his serious face and made her heart skip. "I should go. The Millers will be waiting." At the door, he paused. "Zara, about my proposal, I meant what I said about not rushing you. Take all the time you need." "I will," she promised. "But I won't need much longer." His eyes searched hers for a moment, as if trying to read her meaning, then he nodded and departed into the snowy evening. The next day dawned bright and clear, the fresh snow sparkling in the winter sunshine. The children woke early, their excitement palpable as they opened their modest gifts. Zara watched them with a full heart, remembering too many Christmases spent apart. As 2 o'clock approached, she became unaccountably nervous. She changed her dress twice, finally settling on a deep green wool that Sarah insisted brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. She fussed over the meal, a roast chicken, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, and a special apple pie for dessert. "Mama, you're acting like a schoolgirl before her first dance," Sarah teased as she helped set the table. "Don't be ridiculous," Zara chided, though she could feel a blush rising in her cheeks. At precisely 2 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Daniel went to answer it, returning with Yates, who carried another armful of packages and a bouquet of paper flowers that Mary had immediately identified as having come from Mrs. Dawson's shop. "Merry Christmas," he greeted them all, presenting the flowers to Zara with a slightly self-conscious smile. "These were the best I could do in winter." "They're lovely," Zara assured him, taking the paper bouquet. "Thank you." Dinner was a lively affair, with the children eagerly telling Yates about their Christmas gifts and plans for the remainder of the school holiday. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at their stories. Zara watched him with her children the way he engaged with each of them, respecting their individual personalities and interests. Daniel, always the most reserved, had begun to open up to him, discussing books they had both read. Sarah openly adored him, hanging on his every word. Joseph peppered him with questions about being a sheriff, which he answered with patience. Mary, usually shy with strangers, had taken to bringing him her drawings for his opinion. And Thomas had developed a habit of climbing into his lap whenever the opportunity presented itself, as he did now after dinner, yawning widely. "I think someone's ready for a nap," Yates observed, smoothing Thomas's hair. "I'm not tired," Thomas protested, even as his eyelids drooped. "Why don't you children go play with your new gifts while Sheriff Prescott and I have coffee?" Zara suggested. With minimal grumbling, the older children shepherded a sleepy Thomas from the room, leaving Zara alone with Yates. "Thank you for dinner," he said as she poured coffee into 2 cups. "It was delicious. Thank you for joining us," she replied. It made the day special for the children. They sat at the small table, the remains of Christmas dinner cleared away, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the windows. "I have your gift," Zara said after a moment. She reached for a package wrapped in plain brown paper that had been set aside on the sideboard. "It's not as fine as the music box, I'm afraid." "I'm sure it's perfect," he said, accepting the package. Zara watched nervously as he unwrapped it, revealing the carefully folded shirt within. He lifted it, examining the fine stitching with appreciation. "This is beautiful work, Zara. Thank you." "Check the collar," she said softly. His brow furrowed slightly in confusion, but he unfolded the collar, finding the single word embroidered there in neat stitches. "Yes." For a moment he stared at it, uncomprehending. Then understanding dawned in his eyes and he looked up at her, hope and uncertainty warring on his face. "Yes," he repeated, as if afraid he had misunderstood. Zara nodded, her heart racing. "Yes, Yates, I'll marry you." The smile that broke across his face was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. He set the shirt carefully aside and reached for her hands, drawing her to her feet. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. "I don't want you to feel pressured or I'm sure," she interrupted gently. "The children and I have discussed it thoroughly. We all agree this is what we want. What I want." He drew her closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I love you, Zara Gallagher," he said simply. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you and your children." "You already are," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and questioning at first, then with growing certainty as she responded to his kiss. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zara became aware of muffled giggles from the doorway. She turned to find all 5 children watching them with expressions ranging from disgust, Joseph, to romantic delight, Sarah. "I guess you told him yes," Daniel observed dryly. Yates, still holding Zara's hand, faced the children with a serious expression. "I've asked your mother to marry me and she's accepted, but I want you all to know that this concerns you too. I hope to be a good stepfather to you if you'll have me. Will we live in your house?" Thomas asked practically. "Yes," Yates confirmed. "It's bigger than this apartment room for everyone to have their own space. Even Mama's dress shop," Sarah wanted to know. "There's a building near the house that would make a fine workshop," Yates said. "And you can still use the shop in town for customers." "Will we have to call you father?" Joseph asked, his young face scrunched in consideration. "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable," Yates assured him. "Yates is fine, or Sheriff, or whatever else feels right to you." The children exchanged looks, having another of their silent conferences. "When will the wedding be?" Mary asked finally, apparently having been designated the spokesperson for this question. Yates looked to Zara. That's for your mother to decide. Spring, Zara said decisively. When the snow melts and the flowers bloom. April, perhaps. That's so far away, Sarah protested. Yates smiled at her impatience. It will give us time to prepare properly, to make sure the house is ready for all of you, and to make my wedding dress, Zara added. I have some ideas I've been sketching. So we're really going to be a family? Thomas asked, his 6-year-old face serious. With a mama and a papa and everything? Yes, Thomas, Zara said, her throat tight with emotion. We're really going to be a family. The children erupted in a chorus of excited chatter, surrounding Zara and Yates with hugs and questions and plans of their own for the wedding and their new home. Later, after Yates had reluctantly departed to make his evening rounds, and the children had finally been settled into bed, Zara stood at the window of their small apartment, looking out at the stars shining over San Andreas. Just a few months ago, she had arrived in this town with nothing but hope and determination. Now she had a home, a business, her beloved children, and the promise of a future with a man who loved them all. As spring approached, San Andreas buzzed with preparations for what many were calling the wedding of the decade. Though Zara had insisted on a simple ceremony, the entire town seemed determined to make the occasion special. Mrs. Dawson was baking a 3-tier cake. Mr. Jenkins donated yards of fine white ribbon for decorations. The schoolchildren, under their teacher's direction, prepared a special song to perform. Zara worked on her wedding dress in secret moments, after the children were asleep or during slow periods at the shop. It was her finest creation, ivory silk, ordered specially from San Francisco, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, and tiny pearl buttons down the back. Yates, meanwhile, had thrown himself into preparing his home for his new family. He added 2 new bedrooms to the house, built bookshelves for Daniel's growing collection, and converted the old storage building into a bright, airy sewing workshop for Zara. The children divided their time between helping with wedding preparations and getting to know their new home. They planted a garden that would bear fruit in summer, chose paint colors for their bedrooms, and explored every inch of the property, from the small creek at its western edge to the stand of pines that provided shade in summer. April 15th, 1874 dawned clear and mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of new blossoms. In the small church at the heart of San Andreas, flowers and ribbons adorned every pew. The townspeople filed in, dressed in their Sunday best, chattering excitedly about the ceremony to come. In a small room at the back of the church, Zara stood in her wedding dress, Sarah carefully adjusting the veil in her hair. "You look beautiful, Mama," her daughter said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Thank you, darling," Zara replied, smoothing a hand over the silk skirt. "Are your brothers ready?" "Daniel is with with Yates. Joseph and Thomas are with Mrs. Dawson, and she's making sure they don't get dirty before the ceremony. Mary is with the flower girl, practicing their walk." Zara nodded, taking a deep breath to calm her nerves. "I never thought I'd marry again," she admitted, "after your father left. But Yates is nothing like him," Sarah said firmly. "He's good and kind and he loves us." "Yes," Zara agreed, smiling at her perceptive daughter. "He does." A knock at the door heralded the arrival of Mr. Jenkins, who had agreed to give Zara away in the absence of any family. "It's time, Mrs. Gallagher," he announced. "Everyone's ready." Zara took one last look in the mirror, hardly recognizing the radiant woman who gazed back at her. She was no longer the desperate mother who had arrived in San Andreas with empty pockets and a heart full of fear. She was stronger now, confident in herself, and in the future she was building for her family. The small church fell silent as the music began. Mrs. Miller playing the piano while her husband accompanied on violin. Mary and the flower girl entered first, scattering rose petals along the aisle. Then came Sarah, looking grown up and elegant in the blue dress she had helped design. When Zara appeared at the door on Mr. Jenkins's arm, a collective murmur of appreciation rose from the assembled guests. But she had eyes only for Yates, standing at the altar in a new black suit, his face transformed with love and wonder as he watched her approach. Daniel stood beside him as best man, looking solemn and proud in his new shirt and trousers. Joseph and Thomas sat in the front pew, unusually clean and tidy, their faces split with identical grins. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged simple vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for all their days. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her with such tenderness that tears sprang to Zara's eyes. The celebration afterward was jubilant, with music and dancing spilling from the town hall into the streets of San Andreas. The children moved between tables of food and groups of well-wishers, accepting congratulations and sweets with equal enthusiasm. As the evening waned, Zara found herself standing with Yates at the edge of the dance floor, watching as Daniel taught Mary a new dance step. "Happy, Mrs. Prescott?" Yates asked, his arm around her waist. The name still felt new and strange, but wonderfully right. "Very happy, Sheriff Prescott," she replied, leaning against him. "The children seem to be enjoying themselves," he observed as Joseph raced past, chasing Thomas in some new game. "They've been looking forward to this day almost as much as I have," Zara said. "They adore you, you know." "And I them," he said simply. "They're remarkable children, Zara. You've done an amazing job raising them on your own." "Not on my own anymore," she reminded him, tilting her face up for a kiss. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and they had returned to their home, now truly their home, Zara stood in the doorway of the children's rooms, watching them sleep. Daniel and Joseph shared one room, Mary and Sarah another, and Thomas had the small room near the kitchen that had once been Yates's study. "They're all sound asleep," Yates whispered, coming to stand behind her. "It's been an exciting day." "The first of many," Zara replied, turning in his arms. "I love you, Yates Prescott." "And I love you, Zara Prescott," he returned, his voice husky with emotion. "More than I ever thought possible." 1 year later, on a warm June evening in 1875, Zara sat on the porch of their home, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. Inside, the sounds of the children preparing for bed, Daniel's deep voice reading a story, Sarah's gentle shushing, Joseph and Thomas's muffled giggles. Mary's sleepy questions created a familiar symphony of family life. Yates emerged from the house, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to Zara before sitting beside her, his free hand gently stroking the downy head of their newborn son, James. "Everyone settled?" Zara asked, leaning against her husband's solid warmth. "Almost," he replied. "Thomas insists he can't sleep until he's said good night to his little brother again." As if on cue, the door opened, and Thomas crept out in his nightshirt. "Just one more look," he pleaded, eyes wide in the twilight. "One quick look," Zara agreed, adjusting the blanket so Thomas could see the baby's face. "Then straight to bed." Thomas stared in fascination at his baby brother, then carefully leaned in to place a kiss on the infant's forehead. "Good night, James," he whispered. "I love you." Then he scampered back inside, mission accomplished. "He's been so good with the baby," Yates observed. "They all have." "They've waited a long time for a brother or sister," Zara said, smiling down at James, who slept peacefully, unaware of the adoration surrounding him. "Though I think Sarah was hoping for a sister." "Next time, perhaps," Yates suggested with a grin. Zara raised an eyebrow. "Let's enjoy this one first, Sheriff." They sat in companionable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. From inside came the soft notes of Daniel playing the harmonica Yates had given him for Christmas, a melancholy tune that nevertheless spoke of hope and continuity. "You ever think about how we met?" Yates asked suddenly. "How different our lives might have been if I hadn't been patrolling that stretch of road that day." Zara considered this. "I believe we would have found each other anyway," she said finally. "Some things are meant to be." He smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Like us." "Like us," she agreed, leaning into his embrace as their sun slept between them, and the stars multiplied overhead, each one a promise of the bright future they would share. Years later, on their 10th wedding anniversary, they would gather on this same porch, the children no longer children, but young adults with dreams of their own, and James joined by 2 sisters and another brother. They would reminisce about that first meeting on a dusty road, about the harvest dance where they had first danced together, about the April wedding that had united them officially in the eyes of the town and the law. But both Zara and Yates would secretly treasure most the moment that had truly changed their lives, a quiet conversation in a small dress shop above which 5 children slept, when a sheriff had found the courage to offer his heart, and a seamstress had found the strength to accept it. For in that moment, 2 broken paths had merged into one, creating a road strong enough to support not just themselves, but the 5 children who had already claimed pieces of their hearts, and the 4 more who would come in time. It was, Zara would often think in quiet moments, the most beautiful pattern she had ever helped create, a family woven from threads of love, trust, and second chances. The end.